I stumbled upon the haunted highway where chilling screams echoed in the dark. I never should have opened that door. My heart raced like a wild animal caught in a trap. The regular hum of my daily life shattered, replaced by an overwhelming sense of dread. It was just an ordinary Tuesday morning. The sun peeked through the curtains, casting soft light in my small apartment. Coffee brewed, the familiar scent wrapping around me like a comforting hug. But somehow, I felt off, like static electricity crackling in the air. As I stepped outside, the world seemed to hold its breath. The street was damp, shadows creeping from every corner. It was quiet, too quiet. The wind whispered secrets I wasn't meant to hear. I shivered, a chill running down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Then I heard it. A faint scream, distant yet so close, echoing through the trees lining the side of the highway. My legs stiffened. The screams came again, piercing through the stillness, carrying a weight of unearthly despair. I looked around, but there was no one else. Just me and the darkened road stretching endlessly. Something stirred in the air. It wasn't just the cries, it was a shift, something alive, lurking just beyond my vision. I felt the hairs on my neck stand. A shadow darted in my peripheral, just out of reach. My breath quickened, and with each step I took, the ground felt colder beneath my feet. Loitering laughter echoed from the underbrush. Was I imagining it? I turned abruptly, scanning the trees, but nothing followed me. Only that sinister energy. The world seemed to tilt, fuzzy around the edges, like I had stepped into a dream about to turn nightmare. Objects moved unexpectedly, a rock tumbled from the path, then a low thud like a heartbeat. Fear gripped my chest, squeezing tighter, tighter. I pressed on, drawn to the highway, where the screams danced through the air like banshees calling. Then, the air changed, thick with tension. I halted, frozen in place as shadows stretched and twisted. They approached, growing bolder. My hands trembled, unable to make sense of what lay ahead. Suddenly, there was a deafening crash, like glass shattering, and then, silence. In that moment, clarity bled into panic. I felt as though I was being watched. Something wicked in the distance, unseen but primal. I took a hesitant step back, but before I could turn, a figure emerged from the fog. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure shuffled toward me, its outline blurred against the dense fog that coiled around its limbs like a serpent. The air crackled with an energy that gnawed at my sanity. My pulse quickened, the rhythmic beat drowning out the whispers of the wind. Each hesitant step it took echoed dread. I could see the pale glint of its eyes, hollow and empty, a void that sucked in all light and hope. Help me, ere the figure croaked, its voice a haunting melody, raspy and moist like freshly turned earth. It reached out a hand, gnarled and twisted, fingers elongated as if reaching for something just beyond my understanding. I stood rooted in place, rooted by fear and incentive. Should I move closer, or run? The scream still echoed behind me, and yet I felt a magnetic pull toward this lost soul. Please. It rasped again, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I recognized the voice, the timbre sending ripples of terror down my spine. It was a perfect mimicry of someone once dear to me. A friend who vanished long ago, swallowed whole by a fate unknown. Were they truly there, or simply the echo of my regret? Before I could answer, the shadows began to dance wildly around us. Tendrils reached out, wrapping around my legs, tugging insistently like a child pulling on a parent's sleeve. My body felt heavy, unwilling to comply as I was both terrified and entranced by what lay before me. Then, from behind the figure, shadows emerged, swirling and pulsing like dark water. They whispered my name, they knew me, intimately familiar with my essence. Each syllable dripped with a sickening kind of allure, promising release from the horror stalking me. My heart screamed for me to flee, but my legs were cemented to the decaying ground. Join us. The figure shrieked, revelation twisting its features into grotesque masks of anger and sorrow. The fog thickened, pressing in around me, filled with the clamoring of distant wails and laughter. I peered deeper into the shifting shadows behind the pleading figure, and for a brief moment, I caught glimpses of faces I recognized trapped within their depths, lost souls that twisted in eternal torment. As dread coiled around me, I reached out a hand instinctively, longing for connection, for closure, anything that might make sense of this insanity. But just before our fingers could touch, the figure dissolved into a cascade of swirling darkness, swallowed whole by the chill that enveloped the highway. The laughter grew, it morphed into taunts and jeers that stung like ice shards against my skin. The very ground trembled under my feet as though something beneath was awakening. I could almost taste the iron in the air, thick and metallic, as if the very essence of fear had solidified into a living thing. Something monstrous shifted behind the shadows, a massive silhouette that loomed. The air about it vibrated with an inhuman presence that sent a paralyzing shock through my core. The trees creaked ominously, their limbs crooked as if trying to escape the terror that was nearing. The haunting screams crescendoed, surrounding me like a blinding storm. Just as I turned to flee, a hot breath brushed against my neck, sending my heart hurling into my throat. I dared to look back, and in that fleeting second, a monstrous face appeared, a visage of agony and despair, its hollow eyes locking with mine, revealing an abyss so deep that it threatened to swallow my very soul. And then, the icy fingers of the darkness seized my wrist, dragging me closer to the void. Sorrowful whispers filled the air around me, merciless in their intent, as I felt myself being pulled into the depths, into the screams that cried out for release. Somewhere amid the chaos, a single thought pierced through. The highways were not merely haunted, they were alive, and they were hungry. The last thing I saw was the path disappearing before me, consumed by shadows. Despair clawed at my mind, and I screamed, a sound swallowed by chaos. But there, in the distance, a single flicker of light appeared amidst the darkness, a light that beckoned, that promised salvation, or perhaps a trap. More sinister than I could fathom. I did not know which way to turn, but something was coming for me. Something that meant to claim its next victim. Panic surged through me as I was teetering on the brink of the abyss, my senses dulled by the oppressive weight of darkness. The icy grip around my wrist felt alive, pulsating as if it were a part of the night itself. I forced myself to look towards the flickering light, realizing it was not merely an escape but a beacon amidst horror, drawing me in as surely as the shadows were pulling me away. With my heart pounding like a war drum, I took one desperate step towards the light, dragging my weight against the suffocating grasp of the dark tendrils that sought to ensnare me. Each movement felt like wading through treacle, a struggle against an unseen force that yanked at my very soul. The light was warm, almost inviting, despite the warping shadows that danced at its fringes. "Help me," I gasped, the words barely escaping my lips. But the laughter that enveloped me amidst the winds was mocking, and I could feel the shadows shifting restlessly, writhing against the approaching warmth. The air became thick with a choking miasma, an oppression that pressed dangerously close. The wails began to morph again, a horrific crescendo that threaded their way through the darkness, transforming into something horridly plausible, visions of all those the highway had claimed, begging for release, each voice a note in a dark symphony of despair. I pressed on, summoning every last ounce of strength as I leaned closer to the light, feeling the tendrils slacken ever so slightly in my determination. Faces began forming within the shadows around me, twisted in anguish, floating in the air with gaping mouths that mirrored my own terror. Each fragment of light revealed a new nightmare, a friend who'd vanished, a relative lost, each lost soul managing to claw its way into my consciousness as they called out, "Join us." With each syllable, I felt the weight of their pain merge into mine, amplifying the horror until I could scarcely think. I was drawing closer to the light, yet the darkness seemed to know what I wanted more than I did myself. Even so, I refused to relent. I could not be another statue in this gauntlet of despair. Then, as I reached the edge of that luminescent sphere, a haunting realization gripped me. The light was not a sanctuary. It flickered more like a spectral lantern, illuminating the silhouettes of figures trapped at the very border, lost souls that cast their hopeless, pleading gazes towards me, their forms strewn like broken dolls. "Don't trust it." A voice rang out, sharp, definitive. My own expression blinded with disbelief as I caught sight of the figure who broke the spectral boundary, a face I recognized as my friend who had vanished all too long ago. "It's a trap. It feeds on despair." It will consume you." My heart ached, for hope and terror warred within me. The shadows recoiled momentarily, almost hesitant, as if sensing their grip on me faltering. Yet the presence within the light pulsated, its allure twisting like vines around my mind. I took one last step, torn between the promise of reunion and the palpable dread of what awaited. Suddenly the ground shattered beneath me, a violent fissure yawning, engulfing my friend into its maw as I stumbled backward. "No!" I cried out, my eyes wide, watching with horror as the light flickered and died, the unsettling sparkle scarce revealing the chaos that ensued around me. Now it was darkness that surged forth, a flood of shadow and whispers, gnawing at my ankles, a vengeful tide given life. The faces twisted with agony, clawing towards me, losing the semblance of humanity. "Come home!" The voices brimmed with desperate pleas, yet filled with malice, revealing a truth more profound than any mystery I could have imagined. The roads had shifted, they were not merely a path through the night, they were the very conduit of lost souls, entangled in a web of deceit. As the final remnants of light extinguished, a howling force swept over me, pulling me towards the abyss. And as I braced myself, a chilling revelation seized my mind. The highway was not content with just might, hungered for something greater. Before the darkness could entirely consume me, I glimpsed something moving within it, a colossal shadow shifting and churning, a gaping maw inching closer. In that instant, fear coalesced into abject terror as I finally understood, the highway was alive, and it was not just a witness to the wandering souls it fed on them. The last thing I heard was a blood-curdling roar as the shadows collapsed around me, and in a flash of searing instinct, I reached for the skies. But then came a laugh, a deep, reverberating sound that chilled my blood. Just as I was about to be engulfed, a blinding light erupted from the depth of the darkness, and for the first time, I thought I saw the spirit of vengeance unfurling through the eerie night. "Welcome to the haunted highway," the voice whispered, dark and compelling. "You're just in time for the feast." And in that moment, I knew that my ordeal had only just begun. As I blinked in utter disbelief, the blinding light began to wane, revealing an unsettling panorama crawling with shadows. The rolling hills on either side of the highway, once solid and once comforting, now billowed as if draped in a heavy, creeping fog of despair. I felt the presence of something greater than I had anticipated, lurking just beyond my reach, waiting patiently for its chance to make me part of its grotesque gathering. The stench of rot saturated the air, mingling with a hint of burnt sulfur. For a brief moment, I was able to recognize the familiar stretch of asphalt, its dull sheen reflecting the slivers of light that remained. Yet there was a chilling twist. Dark figures wore the pavement like a cloak. Their forms blended in seamlessly, tethered to the darkness in an eerie dance that left me questioning what was real. I staggered back, trying to catch purchase on something solid as my heart hammered in my chest. It resonated against the hushed cries that had begun to echo from the shadows, whispers raising the hairs along my nape. Search for the truth, they beckoned, but the manner was twisted, each syllable punctuated with a hidden malice that gripped at my bones. Compelled by dread, I forced myself to venture deeper into the abyss that had swallowed everything I had ever known, everything that still mattered. Around me, the macabre procession twisted in and around the edges of my perception, faces emerging to catch the light for a brief moment before vanishing into the dark again. I could see the charred remnants of what might have once been a vehicle, its occupants reduced to wisps of memory, reaching ineffectively into the void, reaching for the light that eluded them. "Help us," they moaned, a chorus of longing that drove nails into my spirit. I fought the urge to join their pleas, for something deep within me urged to resist. As I pressed on, a slow chill crept in like a hostile fog, wrapping its icy fingers around me. Despair dripped not just from the shadows but soaked into the earth, seeping and shifting as if it were alive. In the distance, a gathering dark mass began to form, swirling erratically, almost reveling in my despair. Just as I ducked down instinctively, a piercing scream shot over the howling winds, a sound so raw that it filled my very essence with dread. The figures loomed larger, their eyes hollow, mirrored reflections of the fear that clouded my mind. They turned towards the mass, their breath hitching painfully. A momentary flicker of hope crossed their wretched faces before the shadows surged, engulfing them, one by one. The maw of the dark mass widened, revealing a semblance of a grinning face, a grotesque parody of humanity, filled with malice and, perhaps, a seed of longing. It beckoned, sliding through the darkness, a torrent of despair shimmering like oil on water. My blood turned to ice as I felt the weight of its gaze settle upon me, an insatiable hunger that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Suddenly, amidst the dread that saturated the air, a shape jolted into being by my side, an ethereal form, swaying like a ragged whisper of the wind. It was a woman, her eyes wide yet hollow, her hair swirling as if infused with shadows. "You cannot give in," she warned, her voice barely above a breath as it combated the cacophony around us. "The highway every soul lost here is a feast for him. You must flee." The ground beneath me trembled as I began to understand. This was not merely a passage, it was a sentient being, insatiable in its quest for anguish, longing to devour. As I retreated in horror, the darkness surged forth, tendrils stretching from the mass to the asphalt, attempting to latch onto me. It wanted to weave me into its tapestry of sorrow, to join the howl of the hungry souls it had already reclaimed. "Run!" The woman screamed, and with every fiber of my being, I bolted, the surrounding horror urging me to succumb to my fear. But as I dashed forward, the phantom of my friend, his face now twisted in agony, appeared before me, erupting from the darkness with an outstretched hand. "Help me." His whisper reverberated against my skin, a tender plea infused with desperation that sank its claws deep into my chest. I halted, frozen between the depths of my own terror and the aching familiarity of his visage. Was this the moment to leave him behind? Just then, I felt something cold wrap around my ankle, dragging me back, the shadows yearning to reclaim their prize. The woman's voice faded, swallowed by my rising panic. "Do not look," she cried, but against my better judgment, my eyes met my friend's pleading gaze. What I saw hidden behind his shuttered expressions plunged deep into my heart, a fleshless smile curling back, revealing rows of jagged teeth dripping with the darkness that surrounded us. Before I could scream, before I could turn away, a deafening roar erupted from the depths of the abyss, drowning my resolve in primal fear. And just as I felt the last thread of sanity buckle, the ground shuddered violently beneath me, splitting once more, as the insatiable maw yawned wide, ready to swallow me whole. As I desperately clung to the remnant of a fleeting tether to reality, a deep laugh echoed all around, mocking, taunting Muhile. An abyss of souls cried out for release, and I realized with creeping horror, the highway was ready for another offering. Just as the darkness enveloped me entirely, I was ripped from the ground and pulled with unnatural force toward the gaping jaws of despair. My last thought was a desperate prayer, a reflection on all I had lost, drowning in the unrelenting roar of anguish. Then came a jarring silence, a pregnant pause, pregnant with dread, and I wasn't sure if I was among the lost or still desperately clinging to the edge of salvation. The silence that followed was an oppressive blanket over my senses, suffocating and eerie. My heart still raced, but it felt muted now, as if echoing from a distance. I strained to hear, to grasp any remnants of sound, but even the wind had halted, trapped in a moment of terror. I was no longer on the highway. I opened my eyes to find myself surrounded by soft, white mist that rolled across an endless expanse. The chilling silence wrapped around me like a shroud, illuminating nothing and everything at once. Shadows loomed at the edges, swirling and swirling, yet never revealing their twisted forms. This was not a refuge, it was a void, a pocket of existence clinging desperately to fear. Slowly, I lifted myself, confused by the ground beneath me. It was firm but cold, like stone, yet pliable, almost alive. Panic seized me as I realized the truth. The asphalt was gone, replaced by something more alien and unforgiving. "Help us!" a voice floated through the mist, hollow and beautiful. It instilled a sense of fragility, a chilling invitation to discover the truth behind it. I turned, searching for the source. "Please," the tone trembled, a blend of sorrow and longing, gnawing at my heart. It drew close and intimately familiar yet starkly disquieting. "Who are you?" I called, hesitating, unsure if I wanted to know the answer. "Where am I?" "Here, on the precipice." The voice echoed, warping through the mist. I clutched my arms, a fragile barrier against the unseen. "Those who wandered before you await their reckoning." Through the swirling veils of fog, I caught glimpses of faces half-formed, merging into one another. A child, a man in a suit, an old woman with sunken eyes, all tumbling eternally in some unseen cache of longing. "You must join us before the dark returns." I staggered back, air thickening in my throat, the reality of my situation crashing down like a wave. The horror of the previous moments rushed through my mind, the blinding light, the figures chanting their despair. Had I unwittingly traded one maze of dread for another, a purgatory of sorts designed to ensnare lost souls? Come. The voice commanded, resonating through the fog, no longer pleading but a chilling dictate. They will come for you unless you succumb. What do you mean? I gasped, feeling the chill seep deeper into my bones. Who will come? A heavy silence engulfed the air once more as the mist clawed closer, suffocating the space around me. Time lost all meaning, moments turning into shadows of uncertainty as I felt a pull, an unseen force drawing my gaze down into the swirling void. An undercurrent of movement began to ebb and flow beneath the surface, surging toward me, hungry. I could see them now, not only faces, but shapes that churned beneath the floor I stood upon. They writhed, reaching out with ill-formed hands, mouths stretching wide in soundless screams. I recognized them all, desperate souls calling out, searching for solace denied, a flickering memory of laughter and life twisted into anguish. Then, from the depths of the whispers, the face of my friend rose from the swell, his form flickering between reality and illusion. "You shouldn't have come here," he murmured, a warning laced with sorrow. "This is where they feast. You have to leave." Now, suddenly, the ground quaked violently, no longer a solid surface but a roiling sea of shadows. Tendrils erupted from the depths, grasping at my ankles, tearing at my body as I stumbled back. "The darkness is hungry." His voice echoed through the storm, blending with the distorted cries of others. "Dive." He shouted, the urgency slicing through the cacophony, "or join us." In an instinctive burst of energy, I surged forward, propelling myself away from his apparition, away from the twisting grasp of the writhing nightmares. But the mist thickened around me, pulling and pushing with relentless force. I could feel the energy of the lost coiling around me like serpents, whispering heart-wrenching prayers that momentarily stirred my heart. As I neared a sudden break in the encroaching fog, I noticed an eerie light, pulsating with a strange rhythm. Each beat felt like a heartbeat, echoing my own but twisted and corrupted. The shadows loomed closer, hovering just beyond my reach, encircling me in the suffocating grip of despair. And as my breath quickened, I faltered before the light, paralyzed by the choice: plunge into the unknown or be consumed by the shadows. It surged forward, a wave of darkness breaking over the horizon of my fear, cascading into the light for a moment, blurring reality into chaos. Shapes twisted and elongated, voices rose in a frenzy, demanding attention and pleading for release. As I stepped toward the light, it shattered into shards of radiant agony, revealing the more behind it. The cracking scream of despair shattered the silence, and from behind the veil, something ancient and insatiable stirred. The last thing I heard before the shadows reached out to claim me was my friend's tortured plea: "Run," and in that instant, just as I turned to flee, the ground split open beneath me, and the last thing I saw was his face twisting into that jagged smile. Before I plunged into darkness, the howls of the damned echoing in my ears. The scent of decay seeped into the air as I fell, twisted shapes surrounding me. Darkness closed in, and the silence from before was shattered by the sound of my own frantic heart. When I landed, it wasn't on solid ground but a tangled mass of limbs that writhed beneath me. I gasped, instinct gripping my chest as I scrambled away from the horror. The ground beneath felt soft yet pulsating, like a living creature, hungry for the warmth of my flesh. It groaned, and I could feel the weight of countless souls pressing upon me, their whispers tangled in a symphony of despair. "Help, help us," they cried, their voices distorted, echoes of their past lives clawing toward me like desperate fingers reaching out of tombs. The moans reverberated through me, igniting primal terror that sent shivers racing down my spine. Each breath felt like an initiation into their suffering, a chilling reminder that I was never alone. I turned to flee, heart hammering in my chest, but the shadows shifted, wrapping around my ankles like barbed wire. My skin prickled, and I could sense their eager anticipation, the tantalizing hunger radiating from the dark. They wanted me. "Run. Keep running." A voice called out, a voice that pierced the veil, solid yet distant like a fading dream. I recognized it. It was my own inner scream, urging me to escape. But where would I go? The oppressive gloom curved in on itself, trapping me in this purgatorial nightmare. I pushed forward anyway, tearing through the thrumming shadows that sought to ensnare me. As I stumbled, the ground quaked again, and tendrils shot up, snapping at my wrists and ankles, their grip tightening with each desperate step. I could see them now. Twisted shapes bared their teeth, eyes shining with dark pleasure, they were watching, waiting, and reveling in my fear there. Beyond the grasping darkness, a flicker of light flickered at the horizon. It danced like a star, warm and inviting, but beneath it lay the certainty that I was complicit in my own ruin. The shadows crashed against me, forming a swirling vortex threatening to rip me apart. I remembered my friend the warning, his agonizing expression. I couldn't let them take me. With a determination born from sheer terror, I lunged toward the light. But the shadows thrashed, screeching like banshees. An insidious laughter filled the air, drowning out my thoughts. "You can't escape!" they wailed, their voices a snake pit of sorrow. My feet finally touched solid ground, but it was not salvation, it was a wretched path lined with the remnants of lost souls. Each step resonated with their weary breaths, echoing through the fog, each voice a fragmented memory. Dread coiled in my stomach as I felt their fingers brush against my skin, gliding like rotten silk over my flesh, claiming me as one of their own. And then I saw them, wretched figures emerging from the mist, faces distorted by anguish and fury, eyes hollow but glowing with a feral light. "Join us," they beckoned, their gestures grotesque, limbs misshapen. A child with wild hair limped forward, blood streaming from empty sockets. The cries of the damned crescendoed, filling my heart with dread. No. I screamed, spinning on my heel as the ground shifted beneath me, warping into a path littered with broken bodies. Each face was familiar, faces from my past, the ones I had believed were safe from this evil. That's when the shadows roared to life, drawing closer, the wailing chorus promising countless horrors and forgotten sins. I turned and ran, sprinting now, fueled by adrenaline and the primal urge to survive. The pulsating light grew nearer, but so did the shadows. Their whispers became a cacophony as I stumbled toward the glow, every nerve in my body screaming for escape. I could almost taste the warmth, almost feel the freedom caressing my fingertips, but just as I reached out, the light flickered. It shattered into shards, revealing a figure behind it, a dark silhouette with elongated limbs, its expression hidden beneath a veil of darkness. A Phasian endless stretch of a smile, hollow yet joyous. "You thought you could wake from the dream?" It taunted, low and rumbling, sending tendrils of dread through my core. "Welcome back, little wanderer." The figure extended a skeletal hand, unfurling into a mass of shadows. I stopped cold, horrified and entranced, and one name pierced through knotted despair: "Run." It echoed again, but this time it was intertwined with laughter, sharp and cruel, and before I could move, the shadows surged. A tidal wave of darkness crashed down, swallowing me whole, dragging me into a spiral of chaos. As the screams faded into a haunting melody, the last thing I felt was the ground shifting beneath me again, breaking apart underfoot as I was cast into the abyss again and again, every pulse of energy pulling me deeper into the clutches of despair. Then, everything went black again, the void consuming me, until a single thought solidified into monstrous clarity: this cycle was not of my making, but I was entwined in its horrid embrace forever. The silence that enveloped me was thick and stifling, a suffocating blanket that wrapped around my very essence. I could no longer differentiate between time and eternity, floating in a limbo of fragmented memories and the relentless gnawing of something immense lurking just beyond comprehension. Slowly, light began to seep into my awareness once more, but this illumination felt wrong, distorted, tainted. I found myself sprawled on cold pavement, the ground smooth beneath my fingers, yet I instinctively recoiled, disgusted by the dryness that felt unnaturally alive. It was as if the asphalt pulsed with an undercurrent of malevolence, brimming with the echoes of moments long forgotten and the cries of those lost to the night. I forced myself to rise, swaying on unsteady legs, the air heavy with a rancid sweetness that clung to my throat like an unshed scream. Shadows whispered at the periphery of my vision, slithering against the horizon, shifting shapes that danced just beyond the limits of my understanding. It was a desolate road, stretching infinitely into the darkened expanse, framed by twisted trees whose gnarled branches resembled clawed hands beckoning me closer to the horrors they concealed. The stillness of the highway felt like a graveyard, and I was the beleaguered spectre, an intruder tasked with witnessing the remnants of unholy secrets. As I moved cautiously forward, the ground beneath me felt different from before, as if I had crossed a threshold, like stepping from one reality into another, darker realm. Then, a sound pierced the quiet. At first, it was distant, a muted reverberation like the growl of a behemoth stirring from slumber. It crescendoed quickly, morphing into a symphony of howls, cries begging for deliverance, and laughter that scraped wickedly against the bones of my resolve. I staggered, stumbling toward the source, my heart beating wildly as fear morphed into an undeniable urgency. "Help us, help," I heard again, but this time the voices were more insistent, layered over one another like a nightmare woven with disquieting precision. Something was there, somewhere at the edge of the darkness, pulling me against my will, against my better judgment. I pressed on, the shadows pulsating rhythmically with every step. Future dread clawed at my insides, gnawing at the edges of my sanity as an oppressive presence enveloped me like thick fog, wrapping tighter with each intake of breath. Ahead, I saw the flicker of distant lights. It wasn't the warm glow I had hoped for, instead it shone with a sickly yellow hue, flickering like the last gasps of dying flames. The highway led me closer, the whispers intensifying, transforming into desperate pleas that ricocheted in my mind. Then I paused, catching my reflection in the cracked glass of a half-broken sign, "Haunted Highway." A shiver danced along my spine. An overwhelming urge to retreat pulled at me, but the curious fear compelling me forward was stronger, a magnet drawing me toward the unknown horror. Suddenly, the laughter rang out again, clearer this time, echoing with sick delight. "Join them! Join us!" It sang, a chorus of voices so passionate, so fervent, I felt its tug against my heart. The air grew thicker, the shadows darkening as they lunged toward me, wrapping their fingers around my wrists, dragging me further down this spiraling path. Then, I saw them. Figures cloaked in murky shadows harmonizing in a grotesque dance, their features hidden in a veil of darkness yet exuding an undeniable familiarity that gripped my chest with a vice of recognition. Faces I had seen before, friends, family all twisted by anguish, their mouths stretched into smiles that revealed jagged teeth, glistening with the hunger of lost souls. "Help us," they cried, their tones laced with manic laughter, echoing over and over. I staggered, horrified at the surreal scene, feeling my dreams unravel beneath the weight of a reality that felt too cruel to comprehend. "Don't listen!" I yelled, squeezing my eyes shut, but the noise swelled, surrounding me, drowning my thoughts in a cacophony of despair. I turned to run, but the ground shifted once more, becoming a morass of limbs and cackling whispers pulling me back. Then, from the shadows, the figure emerged once again, the dark silhouette, taller and more menacing, its smile impossibly wide as it beckoned. "Stay with us forever!" it cried, its voice a chorus of enchantment wrapped in malice. With renewed terror, I whipped around, heart racing. I felt it then, the inexorable tug of the shadows, the chaos closing in like a tightening noose. Just as I was about to surrender to the abyss, I glimpsed a small opening on the side of the Roadan alley winding into darkness, promising refuge from the horror. In a rush of desperation, I leaped toward it. But before I could dive into the unknown, a hand snagged my ankle, pulling me back with an unyielding ferocity. I screamed, the sound resonating through the silence, and as I looked back, I saw their faces, nauseating joy warped across their features, a blend of sorrow and ecstasy painting the scene with grotesque clarity. The shadows surged forward, and I felt their insatiable hunger consume me once more. As darkness swept me away, all I could hear was that savage laughter echoing through the void. "You will be one of us, forever and ever." And just before the world faded entirely, a single chilling thought echoed in my mind: had been here before, looping through a nightmare that whispered the darkest secrets of the highway eternally. The ground heaved beneath me as I fell, the grip of the shadows still coiling tightly around my ankle. The world spun, and I thought I would lose consciousness before I hit the pavement. But then, a violent jolt surged through me, the sensation of being pulled, dragged, into a chasm of darkness that seemed to swallow sound and light alike. The laughter of the lost souls faded to a hiss, their joy becoming something more sinister, a mocking scrap of memory that gnawed at the edges of reality. I landed hard, gasping for breath, the shadowy tendrils finally releasing me. I rolled to my side and peered up into the suffocating blackness above. The darkness was alive, writhing with unseen horrors, pulsating like a malevolent heart. Fear prickled at my skin. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline flowing through me like fire as my eyes adjusted to the stifling dark. Around me was a narrow alley, walls slick with an unknown substance that glimmered under an unseen light. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something sweeter, more pungent, a memory of childhood days long gone, darkened by sorrow. Tugging my jacket tighter around me, I pressed deeper into the alley, ensconced in shadows that seemed to thicken with each breath I took. The echo of my heartbeats pounded against the silence, an urgent reminder that time was not on my side. With every hurried step, the whispers returned, curling around me like smoke. Join us were waiting. The whispers danced through the still air, sounding like children at play, innocuous yet laced with an undercurrent of malice. I hesitated, my mind racing back to the faces, those ghastly grins flashing in my memory, hungry eyes glimmering with eternal longing beneath the veil of their shadows. The alley twisted like a serpent, each step drawing me closer into its depths, tantalizing yet terrifying. But then I stumbled into a wider space, one completely shrouded in darkness, where a single flickering light bulb swung lazily from the ceiling, illuminating the forgotten remnants of a forgotten world. Old newspapers, yellowed and tattered, lay strewn across the floor, headlined with the same word, repetitively haunting, disappearances. My heart faltered, the sensation of dread spiking. The articles hinted at stories too terrible to recount fully: a family who vanished, a group of friends lost on this very highway, echoes of laughter and feasting lost to desperate gloom. Suddenly, the flickering bulb sputtered out, plunging me into complete darkness. I stood frozen, every nerve ending awake. The oppressive silence felt more like a living entity than ever before, suffocating my breaths. Then, like a nightmare taking shape, I heard the sound of running feet, padding against the ground. Closer and closer they came. A chilling realization hit me: I wasn't alone in this darkness. "Help, save me!" a voice trembled from the void, quaking with desperation. My pulse receded. "Child?" I could barely form thoughts as the horror seeped into my bones. I craned my neck, trying to peer into the darkness to find its source. "Where are you?" I shouted, realizing how pitiful my voice sounded in the consuming night. "Help me!" Came the voice again, this time dripping with despair. "They're coming!" Every instinct screamed at me to flee as the sound of whispered voices rose around me, chattering incoherently, matching the pace of my growing panic. I turned, intent on fleeing the alley, but something lashed out. A sudden cold grip shot across my shoulders, holding me in place. I felt my heart almost stop. The familiar laughing had returned, echoing around the walls, each note clawing at my sanity. They were their outrageous shadows flickering around me, formed by the very essence of fear and anguish, mouths stretched wide in smiles that promised joy but delivered despair. In a sudden rush, the lights shot back on. But the sight that met my eyes was worse than I could have imagined. The walls were no longer bare but covered with grotesque portraits of souls lost on this haunted highway, each painted in vibrant colors yet hollow, their eyes wide with terror. Pained expressions mirroring the loss of their essence. Then, I saw a shadow beyond the portraits, moving with a deliberate grace, a figure that held the essence of the darkness itself. Its gaze locked onto mine, depthless eyes filled with a knowing hunger that made my blood run cold. "Do you see them?" it whispered, its voice rolling through me like a distant thunderstorm. "They cannot leave, and neither will you." Before I could comprehend the enormity of its words, the shadow surged forth, eager to swallow me whole. "Help me!" The child's voice rang in panic, but my body refused to move. I could only stand and watch as the darkness closed in like a suffocating shroud, a cacophony of laughter, despair, and hunger merging into a single sound, louder and more terrifying than I ever thought possible. A blinding pain seized my chest, and as everything around me swirled into chaos, the last thing I glimpsed was the child's pleading face, distorted in shadows, before the abyss consumed me entirely. And in that moment, I understood there was no escape from the haunted highway. It never ended, it only drew me deeper into its endless, nightmarish embrace. As the darkness enveloped my senses, I was overtaken by a realization more terrifying than the void itself. I had become part of the landscape, just another soul bound to wander these cursed roads for all eternity. The last of my will flickered like a dying flame, and then, the laughter started anew, echoing around me, welcoming me to the fold as I braced myself for what lay beyond. But the feeling surged once more, my body loosened, and with one last desperate push, I threw myself toward the sound of the child's voice, just as the laughter morphed into a terrifying crescendo that promised to end in silence. The darkness pressed upon me like a heavy cloak, smothering any remnants of hope. I stumbled forward, disoriented, casting frantic glances into the shadows that danced just beyond the reach of my vision. The child's voice had triggered some deep instinct, a flicker of a will to fight against the impending doom that loomed around me. I had to find the source of that desperate plea. "Where are you?" My voice rang out, harsh against the oppressive quiet, but it was met only by a dreadful silence that felt pregnant with anticipation. But then, through that silence, the voice returned, trembling like a leaf caught in a gale. "Help me. Feel, take me." The urgency clawed at my insides, propelling me deeper into the labyrinthine space. Each step felt heavier, as though the ground itself begrudged my passage. I strained to match the direction of the voice, tracing it through a series of endless twists and turns, flanked by walls festooned with grotesque shadows, silent witnesses to suffering I couldn't fathom. "Please, don't let them get me." The fear in the child's voice shattered the stillness, and I pressed forward, shoulders tingling as breath quickened in anticipation. My imagination painted horrific images. What were they, these they that the child feared so deeply? "Keep talking. I'm coming," I shouted, desperate to keep the connection alive. The walls of this maddening darkness seemed to ripple, as if something watching was toying with me. The air grew colder, each woeful breath a reminder of the more sinister forces lurking just out of sight. Then, without warning, the ground beneath my feet gave a sickening lurch. I stumbled, catching myself just as the wall beside me disintegrated into a blinding mist. Glistening darkness swallowed the remnants of the passageway, drawing me toward a threshold where shadows danced delightfully, beckoning me closer with unspoken promises. "Help me." The shriek reverberated, a treble of panic that soared straight through the fog of dread veiling my mind. I hurried forward, crossing into whatever abyss lay before me. As soon as I stepped through, I found myself in a cavernous room, an unnatural void illuminated by ghostly wisps that floated lazily in the air. The ground was littered with discarded remnants of lives once lived, broken toys, abandoned shoes, fragments of letters. "I'm sorry," they read. "I'll be home soon." My stomach churned at the implication of forgotten tomorrows, a cemetery of hopes now rippling with despair. Straining, I called out, "I'm here. Where are you? Show yourself." My voice wavered, swallowed by the echoes of the past, but then, an ominous hush fell over the space, and an icy dread seeped into my bones as shadows coalesced around me, swirling like smoke, whispering my name in a chorus of twisted mockery. They were here, the entity that haunted these forsaken halls. Suddenly, the child's voice rose, arguing a scream of unbridled terror that cut through me like a knife. "Run!" Panic shot through my body as I turned back toward the now closed exit, only to find it swallowed by a thick veil of writhing shadows. The walls began to pulse, contracting and expanding, as if the realm itself was alive and it hungered. From within the inky blackness, grotesque shapes began to emerge, crawling toward me with unnatural speed, limbs stretching impossibly long. Each shadow boasted 1,000 faces, each a mirror of despair and desperation, eyes wide with a hunger fit only for the living. I sprinted, heart racing, dodging spectral hands that reached out in desire. I felt the cold breath of something dreadful against my neck, a panicked surge of adrenaline propelling me toward the unknown, deeper still into the depths of this abysmal place. Just as I thought I might escape, I burst through into another chamber, the sight before me freezing my blood. The walls were adorned with the very faces I'd seen earlier, but this time, they wore expressions of unearthly anguish. Each pair of eyes closed on me as if they could see the spiral of my fate tightening around me, and then, right in front of me, stood a creature. Cloaked in darkness, a harbinger of my doom. Its eyes, fathomless and ancient, locked onto mine, reveling in the fear that radiated from me. The whispering crescendo reached a fevered pitch, and I could see the features of each tortured soul forming behind it, writhing in futile agony. "Join us," it intoned, its voice a symphony of torment that seeped into my very essence. "You are part of us now." As I stared into the abyss, time seemed to freeze, reality distorting around me, the shadows around me poised to converge like a hunting pack. I felt the grip of despair deepen. The last of my strength slipped away, my breath hitching in my throat. Suddenly, with a surge of supernatural force, I was yanked backward toward the swirling mass. My back hit the ground with a thud, and the darkness enveloped me, a smothering blanket closing in. "Help!" I screamed into the void, a plea that echoed, reverberating like a heartbeat, but the response was a cacophony of discordant laughter, the sound unraveling my sanity. And just as I felt myself slipping, the shadows began to recede, peeling back to reveal the child at the far end of the chamber, illuminated by an ethereal glow that felt warm yet haunting. Their eyes were wide, filled with pleading tears, and in a heartbeat, they whispered the words that shattered me entirely. They are not here for you, they are here for me. In that moment, the shadows surged back, a roaring tide casting me aside, and the last thing I saw was the child's face, transformed into something monstrous as the abyss claimed us both. I woke up feeling cold, the chill biting into my skin as if I had just surfaced from a frozen pool. I blinked hard, fighting the heaviness in my eyelids, and looked around. The fog had dissipated, replaced by a nebulous twilight that flickered with an unnatural light. The air was thick, laden with the stench of something foul and decaying, yet underneath it stirred an odd warmth that coursed through my veins. I was standing in the middle of the highway, my feet planted on the asphalt that felt alarmingly alive beneath me. I gazed down, shock bubbling through me. The highway was slick, it shimmered as if nourished by something grotesque, glistening with what reminiscent something warm, something that could almost be blood. Or where am I? I whispered into the void, fear clutching my heart. No response answered me except for the insidious laughter echoing from the shadows that skirted the edges of the road. Heavy clouds surged above, boiling and roiling even though no wind stirred the air. I took a step back, trying to wrestle with the dread sinking into my bones. Then, through the haze, that voice returned, the sweet, childish timbre that had beckoned me before. "Help me! They're coming!" I felt the pull of those simple words, a command cloaked in hysteria, and it filled me with horror, igniting my resolve to find the source. But then I remembered their demand. Those shadows had not only tried to ensnare me, but the whispers of the lost souls were clear. They were ready for something. For me, or for another? I hesitated, unsure of my next step, my mind racing to comprehend the truth that slithered at the edges of my reality. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted, the shadows coalescing into a dense mass that hovered ominously. I could feel their anticipation washing over me, hungry, visceral, primal. I turned to run, but the asphalt began to ripple, pulling at my feet like it was a grate, yawning, more eager to consume me. But as I spun, something caught my eye: figures emerging from the darkness. Bound in chains of shadow, their faces stretched into malignant smiles that seemed familiar yet bruisedly wrong. Blinding recognition washed over me. It was my familiar friends. Each one twisted into nightmarish reflections of their former selves. No, I gasped, shoving back against the disturbance in the air that kept me trapped. "You can't be real," a mirthful and sickening laughter resounded through the night. "Welcome back, wanderer," they sang, a twisted symphony of terrifying joy. "You can't escape, and neither can we," I stumbled, feeling the tremors crack through the road like earthquakes, rattling my mind. But I didn't fall, couldn't I? Would not become part of this cruel ensemble. "You're dead!" I screamed. "You all disappeared. I lost you." Their grotesque grins widened unnaturally, teeth glinting in the sparse light, but amidst the mass emerged the child. The illusion of innocence morphed into something dreadful as their features twisted into that bleak smiley smile devoid of warmth. "You set us free, remember? Now it's my turn to save you," the child's voice taunted, mocking me. And I felt a horrifying realization settle like a leaden weight in my gut. No. No, it couldn't be. The truth began unfurling like a dark flower blooming in my mind, an understanding woven from the essence of despair that drenched this haunted place. They weren't trapped souls, they had chosen this abyss. They were eager to devour, meant to keep me bound to this everlasting nightmare. "You brought me here." I stumbled back, the pavement shuddering with an eagerness to swallow me whole. "Join us, little traveler," the chorus shrilled, their hands clawing at the air. The shadows danced closer, twirling gleefully, and I was consumed by a tidal wave of dread. "Join us." They cried again, and I understood each spectre of despair was not just a plea for connection, it was food, a grotesque harvest eagerly awaiting. And as I spun to flee, the darkness lunged forward in hunger, their laughter intensifying, a sound that would echo through my very soul. I wanted to scream amidst the agony of realization that the child, the very essence of innocence, was the harbinger of doom, a puppet whose strings were tightly wound by the insatiable pressures of this reality. "It was never about saving me," I shouted, the edges of confusion crumbling away, and the truth ignited a fire of sheer desperation within me. As I whirled away, I felt something shift. It swept through the very ground beneath me. I would not allow this to ensnare me. I sprinted forward, driven by primal fear that tugged at my heart, smashing through shadows and echoes that insurmountable grief clawing at my heels. Ahead, I could see a flicker, a break in the veils, a dim light beckoning me to freedom, but just as I neared it, I felt their cold grasp latch onto my ankles, pulling me back, entwining me with the nightmarish chorus. My screams mixed with their laughter, creating a dissonance of despair that resonated through the very fabric of reality. And then, from the depths of the murky laughter, a single sound broke through, a voice that sent icy fingers spiraling into my veins. "You're home now." With that, all lights extinguished around me, plunging me into the void. And there, shrouded in silence, I would forever be, just another whisper on the haunted highway, waiting for the next fleeting traveler to drag into the abyss. The truth was far more haunting. I had become the highway, alive, ravenous, eternally hungry for the warmth of another soul. In the end, the darkness wasn't just my captor, it was my destiny.